So we talked a lot about the different types of faders. There are 5 main types of faders in the Digico world. Let's talk through those. Firstly, we would have inputs.
Correct.
Talk about just what they are, how we identify what's what.
So you've got your input channels, which has all of your input processing. You would assign those inputs from like your SD rack or your D racks. And then you've got the EQ, you've got your gates, compression, all your aux sends coming down in a similar signal flow.
So an input is any type of individual source coming from stage. A kick drum, a bass guitar, a vocal, a computer, whatever. Everything, every individual source is an input. Next, we would have Auxes. How would you explain an aux?
An aux is anything that's not going to your primary mix bus. So like your in-ears, your effects sends are going to come from a aux mix. Your
reverb sends.
Your
so with
band mix, your in-ear mixes.
With an aux, we're able to adjust every input individually to a secondary output source, whether it be an in-ear monitor, to an effect unit, or whatever it may be. That is all individual. Each input is individually controlled to each separate output. That's an auxiliary. Whereas with a group is their next type, which is the red colored fader. What is it? What is the difference in an aux and a group, Scott?
An aux, like you're saying, is the ability to individually control a group. You're just sending. It's a fixed level that's being sent to the group, which then can be used to be sent elsewhere, like your master bus or matrix outputs, or you can even, like your vocals, you're sending back to the in-ear mixes for like your band, so that your band is getting a little bit simpler.
Right. So for us, in our context, the groups is like a routing funnel. Okay, if you picture the very top of a funnel is all of our inputs. Let's say we got 40 inputs coming from stage. All of our drums, all our guitars, keys, and tracks, and vocals. About 40 inputs. That's the very top. All those inputs have to be routed through a group before they can go out anywhere in terms of the main house mix. So they're all routed through that. It's not individual level controls to that mix. It's on or off. It's assigned to a group, and then it follows the main fader.
And how you would go about assigning those is tapping the bottom of your input channel, and then you have your groups assigned stereo and mono that you can select from to actually send them.
So you see that the tom here is assigned to the drums group, which the entire drum kit would all be assigned to that drums group.
Yep.
And only the drums group, nothing else. Okay? So the fourth type we have is a control group, which we're not using on this board, but explain it to us, Scott, or maybe set one up really quick.
Okay. So I personally use control groups a lot to control. It's like a remote control of the fader itself. Similar to a group, but instead of on the group where you actually have channel processing, you don't have any sort of channel processing on a control group. All you've got is literally a fader that's controlling that group of inputs.
So it's important to note that on a group, the red groups, the audio from the input channels is actually passing through that group, and whatever you apply to that group is applied to all of those inputs as a whole. Okay? That fader, the group fader, is then controlling the output level to wherever that group is routed. On a control group, which we don't have any set up, but it's just a remote control. The audio is not passing through there technically. It's just a remote control for multiple other faders. So if I had all the drums pushed up here, and then all these were assigned to the,
So this is a great visualization of what the control group is doing digitally. Is you're controlling how the faders are actually moving based on where the control group fader is at.
got it? So some of our systems are still using control groups. I'm kind of moving us away from that and moving us towards all operating on these red groups alone. And there's some other more in-depth reasons about that, which we'll kind of maybe get into later. But it's some very slight but important differences of operating on groups versus control groups. And we'll get into more to that later. Great. Our last type of fader strip is the matrix. Talk about that. What is a matrix and what are we using them for here, Scott?
So the matrix is how we are actually sending audio to the different locations that want to get your like your main mix.
So the last step in the chain before it actually goes out to a speaker.
Correct. So for most of you guys, it's going to come through. Your outputs are going to look your main left, right, your lobby, and your record feeds.
Everyone has that just exactly the same.
And that's how things, you would then assign those to outputs, physical outputs on your I/O that would go to the different locations, like your main PA, your lobby speakers, your recorders.
Yeah. So why is it a matrix? Explain the matrix to us. How is it different than just the main left, right fader, or what? Why are we using a matrix for that?
Flexibility is one of the biggest reasons.
So a matrix, I like to say it this way, a matrix is a mix of mixes, okay? So these red groups are mix buses, okay? A bus is any type of routing path, whether it's the main left, right, an auxiliary, a group, or matrix. They're all called buses, okay? These are mixed buses, so audio is routing through there. A matrix is a mix of mixes, okay? So on our matrix, this board has what's called a 12 by 8 matrix, meaning there's 12 inputs and 8 total outputs. We're using 5 of them, main, left, right, lobby, and a stereo record. That's 5 matrix outputs that we're using. Okay, we can have 12 inputs into the matrix. Talk us through what our inputs are and then how we route them all and how we're doing that, Scott.
So we are routing our groups, our inputs into the matrix mixer. So this is literally just ons, offs, and volume knobs. So you can go through and select as many of these as you want and adjust them with your touch and turn knob here. You can turn them on and off with that. And then you can clear all of your knobs at the same time. But so all these are coming as inputs into your mixer. And then you can select based on however many outputs, like you guys have got the 5 different outputs, what's going where. So you've got pretty much everything except for your audience going to the master bus. And then you've got your record feed, which is getting everything, I believe, including your audience. But then you've got your lobby feed, which is only mono. And this also allows you to adjust, okay, I don't necessarily want as much drums in my lobby as I want like the band, but I want the vocals to sit on top of everything, so I can adjust what I don't necessarily want, something I want to sound differently in the main room that I know my lobby speakers can't handle a fat bass guitar or a pumping kick drum.
Yeah, so a lot of times in our lobbies, they're people that are they don't want it to be quite as loud. We may not want as rock and roll. It could be outside in the high school lobby in maybe a very reverberant space, not like a great sounding auditorium. So we may want less effects out there, less drums out there, more vocal heavy. So the matrix lets us adjust those via groups without having to mix separately. We're able to just push faders up and make it sound good in here, and through the matrix we can kind of control what those other environments, our recording or our lobby feeds, will sound like without having to like chase it down and cue it up with a set of headphones or whatever and make individual tweaks. This is kind of a preset, fail-proof way to let that happen. So if you're mixing on a Sunday and your campus director comes to you and says, hey, the music sounded awesome, but the pastor is really quiet and out in the lobby, you can come here into your matrix. Okay, pastor is in the speech group. Okay, so we can take our speech, okay, and we're going to adjust it into our lobby, up or down, whatever he says it needed, okay? And then that now controls that level to the lobby of all of our speech groups, or all of our speech inputs, okay? Talk about I'm sorry, I just closed the matrix. Talk about the patching into the matrix. Explain that to us, please.
So at the top here where you see the label, you can touch on the label and it brings down the menu where you can hit matrix input. And that's going to fold out into this, this input channel routing. It looks the same on any input channel that you're going to.
So we're just basically telling it what to listen for.
Correct.
For that input source.
So this is going to give you a list of sources, devices. It's going to give you what's in that device and then what you can go. So like if you wanted to come straight off of one of your racks, you could go in and tell it, I want the input from here. But 90% of the time, for a matrix, you're going to want it to be internal. And then you can go and assign based on what you're looking to send to different places.
Yeah, so all 12 inputs into the matrix are all of our red groups, okay? So here's what you need to know in conclusion for this section is all inputs come in, they have to be assigned to one of the red groups. All of those red groups are the inputs into the matrix, okay? So here you see stereo drums, stereo band, mono vocals, and stereo effects. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, okay? We come up here, and our first 7 inputs into the matrix are drums left, right, band left, right, vocals, effects left, effects right. Okay, we've got a couple more groups back here, mono speech, stereo playback, that's Spotify, your CG computer, anything else that's getting played back, and a stereo audience if you have audience mics. And those are all set as the inputs into there as well. Okay, so that is how we're using the matrix and kind of the benefit of it. So these are all set. If you look here, if we select these inputs, the input is the internal group. It's drums left, and then drums right, band left, band right, so on and so forth. It's all 12 of these group channels that we have set up are going to those matrix inputs and then routed to all the various places. Okay?